right, can you hear me all right? Oh yeah, mic's working good. I think also in my bio was something about like I've taken on the suburban dad role of smoking meats, so I just love the fact that there's a freaking smoker on stage right now. That's just on brand. Well, hey everyone, it's great to meet you. I'm talking about something today that I've been actually thinking about for a while, but a little bit more so in kind of current economic times, called the DevOps Hangover. You might be thinking exactly what is the DevOps Hangover? And it's essentially how zero interest rates over the last 15 years really fueled greater investments into VC-backed technology companies. Riskier and riskier companies, wildly unprofitable companies, open source companies. Those three are kind of a Venn diagram. Sometimes they just completely overlap with a circle. So we're at a DevOpsDays. We're all technologists. These are investments that have fueled kind of the backbone of much of the software that we use today. But then with this money, all these companies took essentially a growth at all costs mindset. Budgets were inflated, team sizes were inflated, salaries were inflated. So these companies were armed with a lot of money, they grew like crazy, and that's really the nature of venture capital. So when you take a venture capital investment, they want you to spend that money relatively quickly, in 18 to 24 months. They want you to then raise again at a higher valuation. It benefits the VC portfolio as it increases in value. And they use that growth to raise more money from what's called LPs, which are limited partners. And risk-free rates at the time were so low, you could wait a decade for returns, and many of them did. So then this forced big companies to go and essentially do the exact same thing. They wanted to capture money in the market, and it essentially turned into just quite literally an arms race in consumption. So this isn't like a how to do DevOps talk. This is a talk that is essentially how did we get here? And I'm going to talk about some of the unique challenges that I think we're going to be dealing with today and possibly in the future. I think there's completely new rules that we all have to play underneath. I do hope to give some actionable advice at the end. I hate the ones that are just like, I'm just here to crap all over things. There are some things I think we need to start focusing on, and so that's kind of where we're going to talk about as well. But mostly, I don't think we can fix things if we don't understand how we got here today, and essentially the forces largely not under our control that led us here today. So before I go too far, you're probably wondering who's that long-haired hippie on stage. This is my profile picture I use literally everywhere online. It's a complete lie, and I'm sorry for that. I got my start in technology a long time ago as an internet service provider. That was kind of the place that people of my generation generally got into technology, and I found myself really liking the startup life, just kind of fast-paced and dynamic nature. I've done DevOps, air quote, for a long time. I've also kind of pivoted into product roles. Mostly I learned that product managers are never paged at 2 a.m. when stuff went down. It's kind of a weird thing. So that was really exciting to me as someone who was paged at 2 a.m. I've worked at 11 startups. I actually had to do the count for this. It was kind of shocking to see. And again, my profile picture is basically an avatar. I just, if I update it to the long hair and then I cut it, it's just going to confuse everyone. So where can you find me? I currently work for AppMap. We're runtime code quality analysis. We give developers deep insight into their code. We're Boston-based largely. Everyone is in this area. And so we do analysis kind of in the IDE, code editor. It's really interesting actually for me as a technical operator to be more on the developer side, largely just seeing the sad state of developer tooling in many ways. A lot of operators, including myself in the past, I feel like we had so many tools, we could land rockets on the moon, and then looking at developers, they're still at the bashing rocks phase of their monitoring journey. So back in 2012, I actually started and continued to run something called BossOps, which is the Boston Technical Operations Group. We used to do networking events, people networking, not routers. We would get together and do those. We're now mostly just in Slack. We're generally called the Boston DevOps Random Channel. It's maybe about 500 or so people that are in there, and it's a wide variety of conversation. And if you want to find me, social media is kind of weird right now, so I've actually created a link tree. There is a link towards the health site formerly known as Twitter, which I do still exist on there. But you can find a bunch of other links, including a link to BossOps if you did want to join. And just last thing here, I did this video series. I interviewed 31 experts, asking them how they pronounced various tech lingo, acronyms and tools. And I put all the supercuts on TikTok if you're under the age of 30. And if you're over the age of 30, don't worry, I put them on YouTube Shorts as well. So I also put the full like game show style. There's actually a few Boston DevOps folks that you'll see that joined me as well, so I definitely appreciate their help. So if you always wanted to know if it was pronounced sudo or sudo, you can go check that out. Or if you thought system cuddle would be more popular than systemctl, or if you're someone who pronounces AMI like Amy or Ami, both incorrect, you can watch those videos as well. So a big part of a conference talk is you have to have this like credibility slide. And so why should you listen to me? I don't know, because I'm on stage and you're sitting there. That's part of it. But I don't consider myself an expert, but I do consider myself being lucky or unfortunate enough to just being at the front row of kind of this low interest rate mess that we've had over a long period of time across a lot of different companies. And I like to say that there's not like kind of two sides to the money equation. It's almost like a dodecahedron. There's a lot of sides to this money that kind of flows into companies. And I've been on the side where a technical operator to spend the money that I thought was necessary to run cloud services. I wasn't about to spend less of my not money to run less services that would increase my risk of getting woken up at night. No one ever asked what I was spending. No one really ever cared. I also worked with companies later on when they said, why are we spending so much money? We don't know why we're spending so much money here. And then I've been also on the side of actually raising VC money for startups that I've worked at, including in 2021, when a VC literally said to me, we can make the valuation whatever you want. It was very clear we were at the absolute top of that bubble. So what are we going to learn today? Everyone's going to get Econ 101, how free money created the ZERP. And if you're wondering what a ZERP is, oh boy, I've got some slides for you. We're going to go through that. We're going to talk about generally the question of kind of how we got here today. And people might be like, well, where are we today? What's the problem? I don't get it. Well, you know, we've got $1 million Datadog bills. We've got accidental Kubernetes administrators. Any accidental Kubernetes administrators? There's more than one, I know. We've got enterprises. I had an enterprise tell me at one point, they said, we're a beverage company, right? We make drinks. We make drinks that people drink. We're running so much Kubernetes, and why does it cost so much? No one can tell us why. Like, how did we become a Kubernetes company? So DevOps might have started as a way to get devs and ops to work better on software delivery, but I still think there's a massive gulf between these two teams, between the code they write and how it actually runs. Okay, so someone's here like, free money? What are you talking about? My company didn't get any free money. But I really assure you that with some very rare exceptions, we all actually benefited from having lots of VC subsidized companies out in the market. Nearly all of the open source that we use today is a product of its development being subsidized by essentially free money from investors. My favorite one to talk about is Docker, because Docker actually had to burn through well over $1 billion before they actually figured out how to monetize it. They burned through the money, they recapitalized the whole company, sold off a part of it, and then they figured out how they could actually make money on it. But it doesn't stop with them. Chef, Puppet, Elastic, Mongo, Redis, HashiCorp. HashiCorp seems to be the one that people hate right now, I guess, based on licensing changes. But again, all the same thing, right? It was honestly hard to find an open source company that did not take VC money and pivot into a business. I'm sure there are some out there, but during this time, it was really hard to find. Okay, so does anyone know what a ZERP is? I've seen this, there's a meme online around this one as well. So it actually means a couple of things. If you're not an MBA or if you're not terminally online like some, you might be just confused with this one. So officially, it means zero interest rate policy. And you're like, oh my God, this is the Econ 101 part of the talk. So again, macroeconomic concept describing low interest rates. What's that? I don't know, like the last 15 years. So these are Fed graphs showing the top one is the rate at which banks charge money to lend to each other. And the bottom one is the rate that you would get if you had really, really good credit. It's essentially the prime rate, and it drives the loan and credit. And if you're trying to get a mortgage now, way over on this side where it goes way up to the right, you feel that pain probably really acutely. So out of the ZERP came something called the ZERP phenomenon. And so these are things that financially would have made only sense when money was cheap. Which again, I hate that term, it sounds really silly, but it's really the most apt descriptor that I really have. Because now in a higher interest rate environment, you can look back at those decisions and clearly realize it was pretty stupid. So you might be asking, like, I need some examples. I can't frame myself. What is actually a ZERP? So maybe like configurable light mode, dark mode. was a ZERP phenomenon. Because remember, a company spent legit engineering time to build this. And I remember people getting upset that dark mode did not exist on certain products. It was kind of a wild time. But did that addition add value to the product? Did it increase sales? Did it reduce churn? That's a question mark. Startups with 1,000 microservices were a ZERP. We loved our premature optimization in ZERP time. I actually like this one. I think open source was a zero interest rate phenomenon, right? A lot of money went into companies and a lot of free labor as people gave their time. Again, they were probably working at a company that let them spend their time contributing to open source. And then what's amazing is magically see more than one company change their licensing to not open source when it no longer benefits them. So I feel like I have to have a classic one about the Amazon build, right? And I know some people are like, no, we actually cared about our bill. We bought Cloud Health. We really cared about it. So did I. My bill never went down. We knew where the money was going, but that didn't stop anything because we weren't incentivized to not grow. We were incentivized to grow, to expand, and if you had like an enterprise commitment, you couldn't decrease your spend anyway. You were committed to that amount of money. I have to put in my own, sorry, and I even screwed it up because I didn't use ZERP. I used zero interest rate, but nothing like screwing up your own meme. But I also believe too that deploying Kubernetes for your startup was also a zero interest rate phenomenon. And I don't actually mean, there's people who are deploying on like GKE or EKS, basically a SaaS offering, where you're not running Kubernetes yourself. I'm actually talking about kind of before those services, where people would deploy Kubernetes just to bare metal, I hate that term because it's just a cloud resource, but they would deploy it to like an EC2 instance. And then not only would have to manage the Kubernetes platform on top of their other software, on top of the EC2 stuff. Again, you played yourself. But the honest truth is you didn't. You actually played the next person because guess what? With your Kubernetes experience, you got a better job somewhere else doing more Kubernetes, and accidental Kubernetes has happened. So, okay. I swear to God, let me drive this point home, and I will not say ZERP again. So I read this article that was fascinating to me. Who here has worked for a company that had a room of what's called outbound sales reps, or SDRs, people who dial for dollars, right? So there was a room of people, largely fresh out of college. So this article basically mentioned how ZERP phenomenon was this outbound sales model. And the reason is that this SDR success rate is very low, right? They're calling 100 people at a time. Assume a salary of $50,000, which you might say, that seems low. And actually it isn't. In a lot of cases, fresh out of college, no experience, you were calling 100 people a day, you probably made about this amount of money. So 100 calls a day, 260 work days a year. Your hope is you're gonna sell a $1,000 a year deal. And these two little acronyms here, annually reoccurring revenue, annual contract value. These are very popular terms in the financial world. So that person you paid $50,000 for added $52,000 a year. So you spent 50 and you made 2. Good job. So here's the problem. If the market pays 100 times your annually reoccurring revenue, that $52,000 that you just added increases your valuation by $5 million, right? So there are legit MBAs thinking this is a good idea. And it was a good idea because the market said it was a good idea. So if your CEO and your CFO were like, we're gonna hire 30 of these people to increase our valuation, can you start to see why no one cared what you spent on Datadog or Amazon, right? Because they don't even know how your side of the business works. Remember, they're experts in this side of the world, and they, again, thought this was a good idea. So, God, I hate to keep mentioning Datadog, but look, you either die a hero or you live long enough to IPO. But this one is wild to me, and I know that this is not fake, because I've actually heard this from other companies as well. This one just takes it a little bit further, where the Datadog bill, larger than the system under observation, bad, plus employee salaries and the building the employees work in, right? Absolutely out of control. Cindy had a really awesome tweet. I'm not calling it an X or a post or whatever ridiculous thing it's called now. So a lot of engineers spent the last decade on something called zero interest rate projects. I didn't say ZERP, I said zero interest rate projects. So fancy projects that did not bring any discernible benefit to the company. And discernible benefit to a company would be things like what increases revenue, sales, profits, all those things. And if you were at the right company, these kinds of projects could actually get you promotion. There's real money associated with it. But again, a lot of these were just premature optimization. right? And look, we've all been there. Like, we've all done the premature optimization. I can't tell you how many things I way overly built because that was the time we lived in. I actually interviewed at a company in 2016. They had 5 servers on EC2, and they were looking to build a service discovery platform for the services on those 5. No, not use console, which would have been way overkill. But they were like, no, we're going to build our own. And when during the interview process, I'm like, have you considered DNS or I don't know, a text file on a box? They just were like looking at me sideways. So again, same thing. People deploying Kubernetes on EC2, you're just adding these layers of abstractions. And I actually kind of believe that like what happened was we got too good at delivering software. And we ended up with more time than we kind of knew what to do with. And we were incentivized to grow and plan for growth. And that's where we really focused on. So I'm going to make some statements and generalizations. And I know there's a lot of people who are like, no, my entire application, I've got detailed open telemetry, everything just works, it's all so easy. And that's great, right? But the future is actually not evenly distributed. A lot of companies had what I would call these technology boondoggles that turned into half-done implementations, but then they laid off the teams responsible for those projects, and the ones that are still there are left behind dealing with the mess. I don't need more people to tell me that I hate Kubernetes just because skill issue. It's more so that everyone is doing it because everyone else is doing it. You have to know Kubernetes because otherwise I'm not going to get another job doing Kubernetes. But also, it was pushed so hard in the market, things like Docker, things like Kubernetes, that if you were just getting started, it did not seem like there was another option. That was the only option. And it was very easy to go down a real slippery slope. And there was a lot of consulting companies very happy to take your money to go build you out one of these if you were a brand new startup. They would go build you whole Kubernetes, fully deployed, ready to go. So at the end of the day, sometimes like when you're just starting out with like a new idea, you just need a monolith. Like you just need a thing to get started with. Whether you're a software company that's starting a new product or you're in a big enterprise and you're trying to create like a little minimal viable product to see if it works out. You just need something simple. You still have customers at these big companies, whether you're an internal person, whether you sell it, whether you don't sell it. If you start simply and you can get feedback and iterate on that one. So trying to build for every possible scale point out of the gate made sense when we had unlimited money to go and do that. But I think, again, we have new rules that we're operating under today. So like, why am I so salty about this? I think we've created a new divide called platform engineering. And I very much would love to talk to anyone after this one. It's probably my most hated term that has popped up nowadays because we have Kubernetes admins. And again, it's always Kubernetes admins. Again, it's just the thing that has been created that now manage the cluster and know very little or maybe nothing about the apps because they've told the developers to standardize in a very specific configuration. So, a lot of people are saying, well, okay, yeah, engineers have to think about deployments and services and meshes and node affinity and everything else. And those seasoned admins will just tell me how wrong I am. They'll say, no, the platform team takes care of that. We'll take care of scaling the platform. But then it proves my point because there was a great post. Martin Thwaites actually said this way better than I could say it on a post he made, an engineer from Honeycomb. So essentially, like, there is now a divide. We push for infrastructure and app engineers to work really closely together to reach into each other's worlds and have an understanding of each part so that we can ask intelligent questions of each other. So we can understand how their code works and they can understand how it can operate at runtime. But now we're saying, leave it to someone else. They know what they're doing. But that's where we were 10 years ago. That's no appreciable improvement here. We have now siloed teams blaming each other when things go wrong. So I still love this one, like, works on my machine, and we'll ship your machine. Welcome to Docker, right? But that's the deal, right? It's like, I shipped my container, it's not working, platform, go fix it. And they'll say, platform's fine, that's what Datadog says, and we're now just back and forth. So this Charity Majors quote always works for me, because it's been, and this is a fairly old quote at this point, 2020, yeah, so it's a few years old, but again, we're shipping code to systems we don't understand, and we've really never understood these things. It was always easier to debug systems on individual kind of units. I think this move towards scale has made things a lot harder to debug. And I think the biggest challenge that we're dealing with is we've added a lot of production observability tooling, But we've put that so far away from the code. We've put it at the end of the delivery process. It's so far away from the code that the developers, trying to use that to debug their software, it's largely useless for them. Developers are being told, just fit your app inside of this little square box, which does make it easier for deployment, right? It improves the speed of software delivery. But we never then gave a tool to a developer to see into that, to better understand it. There's some scenarios where developers don't even have access to Datadog or Splunk or whatever service you might be using. But again, even if they did have access, it's so far away from the code that it's kind of useless. So this is, again, one of my favorite little cartoons online, and there's more to it after, but it's essentially this concept of like the developer has to debug their application now like it's a murder mystery. Production observability tells them one thing, but it's, again, not telling them it aligned with the code. So, use OTel, use OpenTelemetry, which, great, that's awesome. If you know where in the code to put the OpenTelemetry, where to put the span, what function is this even coming from? And the funniest part of this one is, the developer spending all this time to like figure out, backtrack how this code works, and someone walks over, it's like, hey Bob, did you get my email? And it's like, poof, right? So developers right now, they just don't have the right tools. There's a great article, the Stripe Developer Coefficient Report, was honestly really shocking. This is kind of the inevitable outcome of the growth at all costs mindset. We were all about shipping features, and we're not talking about like ongoing maintenance of this. But you can see here, 17.3 hours spent dealing with bad code, errors, debugging, refactoring, and technical debt. It's half of a work week. If you include meetings, it's probably even more. The other problem that I see is we actually shifted the operational burden even further to the right. So I don't know if you've ever heard the term like shift left, like move earlier in the development process. Shifting right would kind of be like towards production. So if your app is slow, well, the ops teams just go add more Datadog, right? Broken code gets deployed, well, your SRE team gets paged and they have to go fix it. And if a design flaw gets introduced, well, QA should add more tests. Like, we're missing developers about this whole process. Netflix gave a talk where they essentially said, this was years ago, they came out and they're like, we spend 25% of our infrastructure spend on observability. And everyone was like, wow, we're not spending that much. Well, now that's the metric. We should go spend that much. And we did, right? We all blew up our spend. They came back this year at Monotrama, and they said they're now spending under 5%. They didn't reduce what they're doing, they've optimized it. Of course, now everyone is spending 25, 30%, and they're like, oh God, like how do we go the other way? So did we forget about software design? Consider a scenario where your developer adds code, like a new feature. The code gets changed, makes a repeated call to a database, because the libraries that talk to the database are a layer of abstraction. So those increased queries make your app slow. An SRE gets paged. What do? Same thing that I would have done, make the database bigger so I can go back to bed. But now the cost to deliver that app has doubled. Your SRE team just throws cloud at the problem so that they can get back to what they're doing. So where are we left with from this time of irrational exuberance, right? We've got complex legacy code bases. Like, let me know if any of these sound familiar. Bonus points if the team who built it and understand it have been laid off, and now you have a completely new team that has to maintain it. So out of your control, you have this thing that no one even knows. You've got a microservice platform that grows exponentially. And I'll actually add to this one, probably hot take, but like this includes Lambda as well and the complexity around it. And I was shocked to read the article from Amazon Prime Video where they moved off Lambda onto monoliths on EC2 and saved infra cost by 90%, right? Maybe serverless was a ZERP phenomenon. Hot take, I know, sorry. And my favorite one is the, stalled out, digital transformation project. Even better if you still have that monolith somewhere that everyone's way too afraid to touch. We all have it. So, okay, so how do you be a hero? Right? If we have new worlds, new world today, new rules that we're operating under, and you've already suffered enough with me saying ZERP about 300 times, how can you actually be a hero in your company? Well, it really depends on the focus of your business. And I'd be hard-pressed to find a company today that actually didn't care about operational costs. And I say operational costs because guess what? As a former operator / DevOps, whatever, yeah, guess what? It was my team, it's my spend that was spending the most. The dev and ops operational cost is often the highest line item after salaries. I'm going to include cloud cost in there as well. So what are some things that you can actually do here, right? You could take an inventory. There are services now. There's a lot of services that are to catalog what you have. I think those are super important. Understand the value it provides. That's another big one. And I actually am a big fan of taking multiple data sources to answer these questions, specifically aligning the value a piece of software provides and your product analytics around who's using it, how it's being used. I mean, I have found tens of thousands in services running with absolutely no users actually accessing those services. You know, if you're the one that comes out of this exercise saying things like, well, this cluster costs 50 grand a month to run, but the feature is now only used by one customer, and I talked with the CFO and they only pay us 100 bucks a month, you become a hero, right? Even if the company does nothing with that information, even if you don't have the ability to push that through, you're the one saying these things, I guarantee you the people that are behind the money are going to start listening to you. So third-party SaaS, so like expand out of your cloud spend. Cloud spend is a big place, and there's a lot of easy savings there. But don't forget about third-party SaaS. We've actually aggressively consumed so many third-party SaaSes to run kind of production operations, observability being one of those. So there's extreme high cost to running these things. My favorite is the idea that if you add a custom metric, has anyone ever removed a custom metric before? No, you haven't, right? Have you ever removed a log line? Like, it just doesn't happen, because what if we need this later? My favorite one, again, in the zero interest rate world was, I'm going to keep everything because I might need it. Try that today, right? When the money has run out. So another big thing, identify, attribute these costs back towards product groups or teams that are supporting it. If you kind of understand the scope of where the money is going around which areas, that's another important place to understand, well, based on revenue, like, is this a profitable thing or is it wildly unprofitable? Another big area I like to talk about is just data movement in general. In the cloud world, nothing is free, and moving data around can get really expensive. One of my favorite things was the creation of, like, we're going to create a different AWS account for every little tiny part of our service. Oh God, why is our networking spend so expensive? You know, these are the little things that, again, we got a little bit more premature around. One company actually just turned off services, a whole slew of services, and that's how they found they were spending $5,000 a month for a Slack bot that folks used once a week. So this is going to take continual improvement, right? Kind of sounds like DevOps to us. Hangovers will eventually pass, but it actually passes faster if you do something about it. The ideal scenario is that at worst, you understand kind of an inventory of what you have, you take stock of it, evaluate the tools you're using today, and just start asking the questions of, is this necessary or not? But then, like, how can you ensure this keeps going and stays the same way? It's not a static process. It should be continual and ongoing. You know, if you have any sort of like review process, that would be a good time to bring it in. Find ways to reduce complexity. If you can reduce complexity and spend, that's another really big area. But also, like, don't boil the ocean. I mean, don't get overwhelmed thinking you're going to cut your Amazon bill by 50%. Anyone who says you can do that, it's straight lies. I mean, 20%. Sorry, is there a startup out there that says they can do it? 20%, like, maybe over the course of a year. Again, you have to make the investment and the time to go down that process. It's continual. I like to say include this in your product development workflows. Are there any product managers here? I used to be one. Any PMs? So I'm going to say hold your PMs to account for this. They should know the cost of delivering their feature. So that's a really big part of this. If you hold them accountable, if they understand that a business needs to make money to operate, and this particular feature that needs to be added as part of a sales process is going to cost more than selling it, these are the conversations that you get to arm yourself with to bring it up. If the business decides to go that way, that's their choice, but at least they now know. Another one is adding some low friction software governance, which sounds like such an antiquated, old, gross technology, but that's how we got into this mess, by letting everyone do whatever they wanted and just letting them use and consume services. So, you know, we spend a lot of money on CI/CD services. This is something I was actually really shocked with, the spend that people have on things like Circle CI and other cloud CI and CD systems. So if you're spending all this money in these delivery tools, can you move more technology into there? Can you remove it from production worlds and bring it into there? I wrote a blog post that was the source of this talk, And a really good friend of mine, who I would actually consider an actual expert on DevOps transformations and software delivery, he made this comment, and it was just too good not to post here, which is, look, in uncertain economic times, pretenders get exposed. Just get good at delivering software. And I think a big part of that is reducing our complexity, making more intentional design decisions while also incorporating the cost impact, but also empower the dev teams with the right tools. Let's actually give them the tools that they need so that they can take more ownership of the software that they have to deliver. I am right at time. I really thank you all. I'm going to be here today and tomorrow. I'd love to chat with you in the hallway. Find me later or in an open space. But yeah, thank you very much for having me here.